then he turned on the GoToMeeting.
We'll see in just a second.
Okay.
When it kicks on.
Okay.
See if it clicks over.
We're on sharing.
The answer is no.
Oh, he did.
We are on the record in case number 2022-00131, electronic application of Sebree Solar 2 LLC for a certificate to construct an approximately 150 megawatt merchant solar electric generating facility in Henderson County, Kentucky, pursuant to KRS 278-700 and 807 KR 5110. My name is Kent Chandler. I'm chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission. By virtue of that, and chair of the, we'll just call it the siting board. I'll be presiding over the hearing today. Joining me in the hearing room is Vice Chair Angie Hatton and Commissioner Mary Pat Regan. Also joined by John Lyons, Deputy Secretary for the Energy and Environment Cabinet, as proxy for Secretary Rebecca Goodman, as well as Sidney Montgomery, serving as proxy for Jeff Null, Secretary of the Cabinet for Economic Development. Our two local members are Brian Bishop and Nathaniel Comer. Are either of them joining us today?
I believe that's Mr. Comer.
Nathaniel Comer is.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Comer. I just wanted to make sure we could hear you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. At this time, I would ask everyone to turn off their phones or turn them on to silent mode. And that for anybody joining us online, if you could, please mute your phones or microphones unless you're ready to speak. Purpose of today's hearing is to take evidence in this case. Before we do anything else, we'll have an entry of appearance of counsel for the applicant.
Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I've got a message that the YouTube is not streaming properly, so we might need to wait just a moment. It says there's audio, but nothing's showing on the screen online. I don't know if Anthony heard me. They said it's on now.
Okay, great. For the applicant,
Hi, good morning. I'm Allison Honecker and Brittany Koenig for Sebree Solar 2.
and just to be clear, Ms. Koenig, just at the outset, you all have 6 witnesses this morning, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Jason Andrews, Brian Bartles, Dennis Jack, Elizabeth Wilburn, Aaron Bowen, and Joshua Crawford.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And for siting board counsel?
Heather Temple for the siting board.
Thank you, Ms. Temple. I reviewed the record and saw that notice was given in the Gleaner and the Banner and the Journal Enterprise within the prescribed time. Are there any outstanding motions?
Yes, Your Honor. We had a motion for deviation filed with the application in April, and I believe it's still outstanding.
Okay. And that's related to public notice, is that right?
Yes, it was property owners that joined after the public meeting.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll take that under consideration.
Thank you.
All right. There is no one in the hearing room today from the public, but I would remind anyone that either watches this in real time, or watches this prior to submission of the case, that public comments can be provided to the commission, to the siting board at any time prior to submission of the case. We ask that anybody that provides public comments includes their name, their address, and a case number, which again in this matter is 2022-00131. Public comments can be sent in 2 primary ways. The first is mailed into the PSC at 211 Sower, S-O-W-E-R, Boulevard, Frankfort, Kentucky 40602. You can also email them to a dedicated email address, psc.comment@ky.gov. Again, please include your name, your address, and the case number. All right, given that there's no one, I would note just for the record that consistent with the public notice that was provided by the applicant, instructions on how to provide virtual public comments at today's meeting, that not here in person, were posted on our website yesterday. As of 9 o'clock this morning, no one had indicated their interest in providing those public comments virtually. So, in addition to no one being here in the hearing room. All right, Ms. Honecker, would you like to call or Ms. Koenig, would you like to call your first witness?
Yes, sir. We'd like to call Jason Andrews, project manager, please. And, Your Honor, he he have access to the documents from the file on his laptop at the stand?
They're just documents from the case record.
Yes, they've been downloaded to his desktop so that he doesn't have to go on the internet or anything to get it.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Jason Andrews, 700 Universe Boulevard, Juno Beach, Florida, 33408.
Ms. Comey, before you ask it, just, Mr. Andrews, if you could, however loud you think you need to talk about 30% louder.
Okay.
Just by virtue of the penalty box of your.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Coney, you may ask.
Thank you. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
Okay. Could you please state your employer and your title?
Yes, NextEra Energy Resources, and my title is Project Director Development.
Thank you. And could you just explain your involvement with the project generally?
Sure. I've been involved with the project from some of the public outreach, and then as we put together the application, responsible for making sure we're in compliance and everything is within the application, is submitted correctly.
Thank you. Do you have any updated?
Full data request responses in regards specifically to potential overlap of construction between multiple projects, with just some updated information, being cautious as we look at potential timelines for the Sebree Solar Project and Sebree 2. Just being cautious, there could be some overlap in construction towards the latter. Sebree Solar's timeline is more definitive. Our timeline, Sebree 2, sort of waiting on MISO interconnections, is still shifting, but we feel that potentially towards the start of Sebree 2 solar construction and the completion of Sebree 1, there could be some potential overlap there. We don't believe it'll impact anything that we've submitted in the application, but just want to make sure that with updated information, we're providing that to the board.
Okay, thank you. And is that subject to change?
Yes.
Those subject, okay. Thank you very much. We'd like to offer him for cross-examination now.
Ms. Temple?
Thank you. So kind of starting with that note, when do you expect that Sebree 1 would then begin construction?
We anticipate Sebree 1 starting construction towards the end of this year right now.
And it was stated in some of the responses to requests for information that you believe Sebree 2 will begin in early 2025 construction?
Yes, Your Honor.
And so when you say some overlap, what kind of schedule are you anticipating, or potential schedule?
Well, right now with Sebree 2, that's our most updated projection in the beginning of 2025, January 2025. That schedule is still dependent on receiving our MISO interconnection agreement. And as we look at the Sebree 2 schedule, if everything were to sort of hit perfect, there could be some potential overlap towards the end of the Sebree 1 schedule. And we just want to make sure that we're identifying that.
Are you talking about 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? Do you have
Looking
kind of
at
a-
it, it could be possibly 2 to 4 months.
Okay.
Again, just a projection.
Okay. So then I'm gonna go back to where I was planning on starting. And if any of these questions start to be better for one of the other witnesses that are here today, just let me know. But this site plan that was in the application, I know Henderson County has ordinances about the solar facility. Did they specifically approve of the site plan, or do they just have ordinances that you have to follow?
They specifically approved that site plan that you have in the application.
And do you think that there will be any major updates to that plan? I mean, I'm not talking about some movement of panels within the project, but any kind of major changes.
We don't anticipate any major changes at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, the total project is listed to be 1,460 acres. What is the approximate fenced acreage of the project?
It's approximately 1,000 acres, Your Honor.
Okay. And then it's still anticipated that once you do begin construction on Sebree 2, it's about an 18-month process?
That's our projection right now, Your Honor.
Okay. So for that construction, what is the plan for hiring those people who will be doing the work? Is Sebree Solar 2 or NextEra hiring a contractor and then that person will do the hiring, or how will the process work?
Yes, Your Honor. So once we're able to progress Sebree Solar 2 in the project life cycle, then we'll contract what we call an EPC, or engineering procurement contractor, and then that contractor will be responsible for essentially building or constructing the project.
Okay. In the materials that were provided with the application, it was listed that there will be approximately 200 construction jobs. Is that still kind of the anticipated amount?
Yes, Your Honor, that's what we're projecting right now.
Okay.
As we are able to get a EPC contractor on contract, then we'll be able to refine that number.
Okay. And how did you all come up with that number to then put in the public materials and give to some of the consultants?
Yes, it was just a projection based on previous projects and an estimation based on the size and the acreage.
And do you anticipate that Sebree 1 and Sebree 2 will have different contractors, or it will be kind of just one project kind of being built all together?
At this time, because we don't have an EPC contractor, Your Honor, I don't have any projection on who would actually be that contractor.
Okay. And do you know kind of the approximate spacing between the rows of panels?
I don't know the exact spacing.
And then I know in the Henderson County regulations, it says nothing can be greater, or the panels can't be greater than 25 feet. Is
Yes, Your
correct?
Honor.
And so that includes the panels themselves, but I'm assuming that does not include the buildings or anything else. Is that right?
It's my understanding in the ordinance that, yes, it's solar
Just the
equipment, the
panels,
panels
okay.
and racking, which we're in compliance with.
And I just want to confirm, the roads within the project are going to be gravel?
Yes, Your Honor, that's what we're projecting right now, the access roads.
And will the substation be enclosed in its own fence, or is there just the one project boundary fence?
No, it's my understanding that the substation will have its own fence.
Okay. There is that Texas gas transmission line that runs under some of the project. Could you kind of talk about that agreement that you indicated in the data request responses about the crossing agreement, and has that been fully executed, and what steps you all are taking to make sure the pipeline is not disturbed in any way?
Yes, Your Honor. So we started the communication with the Texas gas pipeline, actually started with Sebree Solar, as they identified an agreement would be required for potential crossings and communication. Sebree Solar has led that communication up to this point. They also, Sebree accounted for a majority of the Sebree Solar 2 parcels in that communication and have executed agreements. Sebree Solar 2 will continue on with that communication and ensure that, we're identifying and making sure that, I believe we identified 3 access road potential crossings with the pipeline, and then 1 portion of the collection corridor would cross. We'll ensure that that communication stays consistent.
And does it require any kind of easement or anything like that?
It's my understanding it's a crossing agreement
Okay.
executed with Texas Gas Pipeline.
And so, do you know, was that executed by Sebree Solar One or NextEra, or who was that done by?
I'd have to follow up on who actually executed the agreement, Your Honor.
Okay, if you could provide that as a post-hearing request. So I do have some questions about the landscape planning. Would that be the best for you to go ahead to ask?
Yes, Your
Okay.
Honor.
So it's stated in the SAR that it is going to be about 20,000 feet of vegetative screening. When we look at the layout of the project, it doesn't look like that covers a lot of the fenced area of the project. Could you kind of explain how you all came up with where that screening is necessary?
Yes, Your Honor. So we based it off the Henderson County Solar Ordinance, which requires screening basically from non-participating residents to include a public right-of-way. And so through a desktop review, we did our best to identify on the site plan where we would place that screening to minimize the impact and view shed from the residents.
And does Henderson County approve of the vegetative screening plan, or did they just require it? Kind of similar to the site plan as a whole?
Yes, Your Honor. They've approved of it. When we conducted the Planning Commission meeting, we discussed, and they had the site plan with the located vegetative screening.
Okay. There was a list of the types of plants that will be in the vegetative screening buffer. I'm assuming that all of those are native plants to the area.
Yes, Your Honor. It's my understanding that they're native to the area.
And do you believe total there will be 2 acres of native pollinators?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
2 acres of native pollinating species?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, the ordinance does say that there has to be the fence that's 7 feet tall, I believe. Are you all planning on kind of any, some have said that it would be a green fence, some have said there will be kind of some mesh screening on the fence to further screen the project from view. Are you all planning on any of that?
Your Honor, right now,
Okay.
we don't have a projection on what exact screening would be used. We'll just ensure it's in compliance with the ordinance.
Okay. And then when do you plan that this vegetative screening will be done? Is it right now going to be at the end of construction as the project moves along? How do you foresee that happening?
Yes, Your Honor. We'll work with our EPC to identify when it will be planted. Right now, we don't have a projection what phase in the construction that it'll be planted.
Okay. And then you said that the ordinance requires that non-participating landowners be screened. Have you had any conversation with any of those non-participating landowners about what kind of screening they would request or anything like that?
No, Your Honor, not in regards to specific types of screening.
Have you talked to them about any portion of the project, the non-participating landowners?
I have, Your Honor,
Okay.
yes.
And what kind of concerns or comments or anything like that did they have?
Your Honor, probably the two most viable comments. One was in regards to the view shed in the screening. And then when we discuss that, we talk specifically about the ordinance and that our mitigation to use the vegetative screening to minimize that view shed as best as possible. And the other concern was probably just being from that we're a company from out of state. There was concerns that once the project, if approved and built, how it would be maintained, who would take, responsibility for it, who would provide the oversight of the project, day-to-day maintenance. And then we discussed how there'll be full-time employees that will be responsible and essentially be members in the community.
Okay. So in the application, you all talk about the Henderson County setbacks for the project, which, correct me if I'm wrong, were 25 feet from the perimeter property lines of the project area, and then 100 feet from any residential structure?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and so could you kind of explain what you all mean by, or what equipment means for you all? Is that the fence, is that the panels, or is it, what is that equipment that it would be at least 25 feet from?
Yes, Your Honor. I think in the ordinance it refers to equipment being panels or racking. In the site plan, we just used the fence, so we took 25 feet setback and utilized the fenced-in area.
Okay. And so, if you know, or if you need to provide it as a post-hearing request, could you provide the nearest solar panel, inverter, and substation to a non-participating residence, to the nearest non-participating residence?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe it was in the noise assessment, so the closest non-participating residence to a panel we have is 131 feet.
Okay.
The closest participating residence to a panel is 135 feet.
Participating or non-participating?
Yeah, the 131 feet non-participating, and then the closest participating to a panel, 135 feet.
Okay. And do you know the distance for the non-participating from the central inverter or the substation?
Non-participating 506 feet from an inverter,
Okay.
and I don't recall the exact distance from the substation.
Do you believe it is further than the inverter? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
I know some of this was in the application, and I believe you just touched on a little bit of it, but could you discuss the public involvement and public outreach that you all conducted for the project?
Yes, Your Honor. For the public outreach, we conducted our public meeting, I believe July 27th, at Atkinson Park in Henderson, as part of the public notice. Then, I believe it was September, the mayor of Roberts, Kentucky, had asked to provide what we call office hours. So myself and another colleague, we went to the Roberts Town Hall basically from 9 a.m. till about 6 p.m. and just provided some maps and was able to talk to members of the community, and it provided a little more opportunity for folks to come in and learn about the project, rather than, I believe when we did it in July, it was maybe a 2-hour period. Other involvement, certainly we've been involved in sponsorships throughout the community. Sponsorships, and in particularly, I was invited to speak about the project at the Henderson County Community College. They have a leadership initiative. So that was a good way to talk to up-and-coming leaders in the community to talk about the project or whatnot. And then most recently in June, in the planning commission meeting, certainly members of the community were notified of that as well, Your Honor.
And there, aside from the concerns you already mentioned about the screening and the, who would monitor the property during operations, were there any other issues that came up during those?
Those were the primary two, I believe, that we've identified.
Okay. In reviewing the leases for the property that is going to be used for the project, it looks like that the leases are in the, between the landowner and either Sebree Solar or Boulevard Associates. And so how is Boulevard Associates related to Sebree Solar 2?
I believe it's part of NextEra, and so before an LLC is created, as land is being acquired, it falls into Boulevard Associates, and then once the LLC, Sebree Solar 2, assigned to the appropriate lease.
And so do you anticipate that all of these leases would be assigned to Sebree Solar 2, or they would remain with Sebree Solar 1?
No, Your Honor, we're actually working on it now to basically assign, we've gone through all the parcels and are working to reassign parcels that are assigned with Sebree 1 Solar and parcels that are assigned to Sebree 2, make sure that our lease assignments are updated and correct, and we're working on that right now.
And so after construction is completed and you all have the project in operations, who, well, not even then, just for the construction certificate as a whole, who employs the individuals that are responsible for Sebree Solar 2?
Sebree Solar 2, and then being a subsidiary of NextEra Energy Resources, Your Honor.
So will Sebree Solar 2 have any actual employees itself, or will they only be employees of NextEra?
I'd have to follow up on who the actual employees would work for. I don't have that information at this time, Your Honor.
And then the information provided was that the MISO studies have not really been completed yet. And it said one might potentially be completed this summer. Was that completed, and have you all received it?
Yes, Your Honor, we actually received it. It was the MISO DPP 1, and we received it July 14th of this year.
Okay, and so there are still several phases to go through, right? So did you get an update when you received that report on when those could potentially be finished?
Right now, we utilize their website that shows the projections, and then they have the MISO DPP projecting November 15th of this year, DPP 3 of January 10th of 2024, and then with GIA's projected April 27th of 2024. Excuse me. We have noticed that a lot of times those projections historically have continued to slip, which then back to project schedules makes things a bit difficult. But those are the latest projections from MISO, Your Honor.
Okay. And the plan is that Sebree 2 will interconnect via the transmission line that was approved for Sebree 1.
Yes, Your Honor.
And has that transmission line or the Sebree project as a whole, has it received all of its MISO approvals, or is it still waiting some of them too?
Yes, Sebree 1 has received their GIA, Your Honor.
Okay. And Has a power purchase agreement been executed for this project yet?
No, Your
No,
Honor.
okay. There was a decommissioning plan completed, or as filed as part of the application. Do you expect that to be kind of the final plan? I mean, I know some of the numbers that might change at the end, but the overall plan is complete.
Yes, those are the projected numbers, certainly if approved. And when we get to the point before filing, we'll need to update and make sure that's, in accordance with Henderson County. Those were, again, initial projections.
Okay. So at one section in that decommissioning plan, it states that all below-grade structures, including solar module support posts, will be completely removed. But then it also states that non-recoverable ground cables will be left. Could you kind of reconcile that, where one says all below grade will be removed, but then one says the cables could be left?
Yes, Your Honor. In with the decommissioning plan, and then when reading our leases with the landowner agreements, it refers to removing all structures, both above and below ground, and that's our intent.
So the leases all contain that everything be fully removed?
Yes, the verbiage in there, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And then, can you kind of explain the process that will occur during construction and then during decommissioning to ensure that the soil quality can be maintained and that the project can be returned to agriculture?
Yes, Your Honor, it's my understanding that as we begin the construction, basically it's communication, both with our engineering, with our EPC. It's in congruence with the agreement signed with the landowner, and then communication with the landowner to make sure that we're restoring everything as best we can to put it back in the original condition.
And I was speaking more specifically about the quality of the soil, not just that, kind of everything's put back in place. Is there a plan or anything to monitor the soil quality now and then at, decommissioning?
Your Honor, we don't have a plan right now to monitor the soil.
I believe that is all I have for you. I have some questions about some of the environmental aspects, but I assume those would be better for some of the other witnesses.
Okay, Your Honor, I'm happy
Is
to
that-
try to answer. But
Okay, I mean, I can go through them if you want. The first was just, it was stated that the jurisdictional determination had not yet been submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers. Has that been done yet?
I'd defer that to Mr. Brian Bartels,
Okay.
our environmental specialist.
Okay, then I'll save the
Okay.
rest of them
Yes,
for him.
Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Secretary, any questions for this witness?
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Andrews. I just want to touch on a couple of things. First, I'll just to kind of follow up on what Heather was asking you regarding soil quality. What will be the ground cover underneath the panels? Will it be gravel? Will it be vegetation?
It'll be vegetation, sir.
So that will assist in stormwater management.
Yes, sir.
And I think I read in your all's data response that you plan on doing a stormwater management plan later on prior to commencement of construction.
Yes, sir. As we further refine the plan, we'll follow the rules and regulations for the stormwater permits.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Andrews, I read with interest the phase one assessment that was done, and if some of these questions should go to Mr. Bartles, let me know. But I do have some general questions. is a little confusing in phase one regarding the number of oil and gas wells that are in the scope of the project. It talked about a couple on a couple of different parcels, but then it mentioned there were literally dozens, maybe around 70 or so identified. And there were a couple of maps in the phase one, I think it was figures 2 and 3, that showed the location of the oil and gas wells. I assume they're mostly oil wells, that looked like they were sprinkled throughout the project. I guess my first question is, if that is in fact what I was understanding about the figures in the phase one, how will you guys manage avoidance of those areas? What is the plan to deal with oil and gas wells and the associated tank batteries and piping as you develop this project? Because it looked like it was pretty heavily laden with this equipment.
Yeah, yes, Your Honor. In our site plan, we've imposed what we think is reasonable as a 30-foot setback from any of the oil and gas well infrastructures to assure that we could basically avoid it in the site plan.
Well, I mean, how much, I guess, with the number of wells that are there, how much is that going to impact your site plan and putting the solar arrays in place? It looks like it would be a rather considerable interference with your plan to me.
Yeah, it's my understanding that we've identified the wells and probably need to do another visual identification, but that we're planning 30-foot setbacks from any oil and gas wells that are identified out there.
Okay. That brings me to another question. What kind of discussions have you had with leaseholders or mineral rights holders regarding operating around this and access to their equipment? Is that part of the lease agreements, or is that something separate?
Yes, sir. It's part of the lease agreements, as well as what we've done is basically identified all the mineral rights ownerships. As you know, landowners on the surface, it may be different for subsurface. So we've gone ahead and identified with each parcel of the project from oil and gas to coal. And we'll seek to see if the subsurface mineral rights aren't owned in fee, would seek a like a non-disturbance agreement. And then any active wells, we would ensure that there's certainly placement and access for those landowners to continue to use it.
Okay, thank you. As you may know, there's a lot of old wells out there that there are no records for. I did notice in the list in the phase one that there weren't any plugging records for several of those. Have you all identified the active or inactive status of all the wells that are known? I did see some verbiage regarding shut-ins versus abandoned. I just wonder if y'all identified the status of all the wells that were identified.
I'm unsure if we've identified all the status. Maybe Mr. Brian Bartels might be able to answer that, Your Honor.
Okay. And this may be a question for Mr. Bartels as well. What if you encounter a well that's previously unknown? This is not uncommon, that you could run across a well that's actually below the surface, and it's been abandoned, and it's just literally a pipe sticking up out of the ground. As a matter of fact, I think one of the pictures that I saw in the phase one may have been misidentified as a drain tile when it was actually, it could be casing for a old well, it looked like to me, but I'll leave that to the experts that were on site. But it just serves an example that this happens all the time. Our division of oil and gas gets calls about a plow hitting an old old well that was previously unknown. Or there's drilling pits as well, as mentioned in the phase one. What if you all encounter something like this? What's the plan to try to deal with that? Especially if it's in the path of maybe one of your racks or solar arrays.
Yeah, yes, sir. It's my understanding that, one, we need to identify it. I'm unsure. I'd have to follow up on the exact steps needed to take to ensure we're in compliance. But I know we would need to identify it in the plan and then certainly adjust accordingly. I would have to provide you a follow-up on what those exact steps are if we identify a oil or abandoned well in the process.
Do you all think that you would possibly plug that well, or would that be something you would arrange with the landowner?
Your Honor, I'd have to follow up. I'd want to make sure that what option we choose is in compliance with state and regulations. I'm unsure of that exact information, but I'd want to make sure that what we're doing is in compliance.
Sure. I think at a minimum, that should be reported to the Division of Oil and Gas. We do have a very robust plugging effort going on right now through bipartisan infrastructure law. But that's something certainly we would want to know. Again, the question is more of how we deal with it in terms of your project and the interruption that it would cause. It's not a small undertaking to plug a well. I mean, it can be done pretty quickly, but it takes special equipment and about $30,000 at this point to plug a well. So
Yes.
I look forward to those answers. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if that needs to come in a post-data request. Perhaps that is the best way to address it.
I think so.
I'll include it.
I think that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Montgomery?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Andrews. I got to first start by saying I am very jealous of your all's corporate location, as my parents actually just have been living in the Juno Beach area now for about 10 years and love going down to visit. So
Wonderful.
definitely a great area.
Yes, sir.
But I just have a few questions, and if these are better directed for others, please let me know. First, are you aware if NextEra intends to enter a pilot agreement or an IRB agreement with the county?
No, Your Honor. Right now, there is no intentions to enter into an IRB or pilot with the county.
And I want to take a pivot here to Mr. Crawford's economic impact report. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at it or not, but in there it talks about during the operational phase there being, presumed about 2 operational positions. In your past or in your experience as a project manager, is that consistent with what you see on the operational side?
It is, sir. And as we looked at the project, I talked with within NextEra on our business management or operations management, utilizing Sebree Solar 2, and asked what a projected kind of full-time employee list would look like, and they came back and stand by, possibly 1 to 2 employees for the project of this size. Certainly, as the project gets finalized, that could be, could change. But however, I think 1 to 2 full-time employees is accurate, sir.
And just to follow up on that, did they also provide kind of a range of wages for those 1 to 2 employees? Is that, I believe in Mr. Crawford's report, he says that it averages to be about $119,000, which obviously is consistently or considerably higher than the average wage in the county. So wasn't sure if that came from NextEra or just his projections.
It's projections, but it came from NextEra, sir.
Great. And do you know just offhand what the skill sets of these employees would look like? Like, are these folks that have bachelor's degrees? Are these just a technical, a technical skill set? Could you elaborate on that?
I'm actually unsure, sir, what the actual job qualifications would be. Certainly, I can follow up if necessary. I'm just unsure what a job qualification would look like for those two employees, sir.
That's all the questions I had, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Comer, do you have any questions?
No, this is very interesting, but I don't have any right now.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I noticed that the geotechnical report from Terracon was a draft. Do you know if that's been updated, or if not, when we might expect to get the completed report? I know they were waiting on some crops to be harvested to finish some of the report.
Yes, Your Honor. We anticipate right now December, so the majority of that report was drafted for the Sebree Solar and Sebree Solar 2 parcels. We still, with the new land acquisition, still want to finalize that geotech with that new land. However, just want to wait until the crops are harvested. We project should be completed around December to make sure we can finalize that report.
This is not your company's first project in Kentucky, so I assume you're familiar with the karst underground formations and potential for sinkholes. Do you feel like you've done enough to make sure that we couldn't expect something like that?
Yes, Your Honor. The initial geotech report, certainly would be one of the, what we call like a fatal flaw or something that we'd have to identify, and we didn't identify that as a major risk in the geotechnical report, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks.
Good morning. On the jobs, the 200 construction jobs, will those be local, hired locally?
So we will contract with the EPC, and it's my understanding that they will try to source locally, but I don't know for sure, Your Honor.
Okay, and on the full-time positions, the 3 or 4, do you know if those will be local?
I don't know if they'll be local or not,
Okay,
Your Honor.
we can ask that in a follow-up.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
So I understand from your response, Mr. Andrews, to Mr. Montgomery, that the $119,000 that Witness Crawford used in his report came from the applicant, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And that's for an average wage during operations of 2 permanent jobs, an average wage of each job at $119,000 a year, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And Mr. Crawford's report notes that the projection aligns with similar projects in Maryland, North Carolina, and other similar sized projects in the broader region. Are those NextEra projects?
I'm unsure, Your Honor.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, where did NextEra get that information?
You know, I had reached out to try to get an average of what we think from our business unit, what we think a full-time employee wage salary would be.
Let me ask you this way. Does the applicant have access to information about what people are being paid for that permanent position in other places?
I don't have access to it. I think we could potentially follow up to find out.
Okay. Potentially follow up to it to find out.
Or
Okay. It's my understanding the $119,000 is based off of your all's experiences. Is that correct?
yes, Your Honor.
Okay. what are you all paying other people in other areas? What is NextEra paying people in other areas to do this permanent job?
I do not know that information, Your Honor.
Okay. So could you let us know?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Because it's one thing to tell us $119,000, but it's a little difficult to understand how the 2 permanent jobs for this, plus I think 4 maybe for Sebree Solar 1, it was mentioned somewhere else that these all earn $119,000 a year, when the economic impact analysis notes that a construction manager for the construction phase makes $129,000 and electricians make $85,000. So I'd be interested as a post-hearing data request if we could get some documentary evidence that people are actually being paid $119,000 or whether that is inflated.
Yes, Your Honor.
To follow up on a question Ms. Temple had, those leases with Boulevard Associates LLC, you familiar with those?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Who is Boulevard Associates LLC?
It's my understanding it's a LLC under NextEra Energy Resources.
Okay. Are you aware of whether Boulevard Associates LLC has an ownership interest in Sebree Solar 1 LLC?
I am unaware, Your Honor.
How about Sebree Solar 2?
I'm unaware, Your Honor.
Do you know whether Sebree Solar 1 or Sebree Solar 2 have an ownership interest in Boulevard Associates?
I'm unaware, Your Honor.
Okay, so Boulevard Associates has a lease, a legal right, to much of this land. Well, let me just. Sebree Solar 2 LLC does not have leases for the entirety of the land that you are proposing the construction certificate for. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you have a contract in place that provides for an expected assignment from Boulevard Associates LLC to Sebree Solar LLC for these leases?
Yes, Your Honor. That's what we're working on to make sure that we can reassign, because you've had Boulevard Associates, some with Sebree Solar, that we can reassign the appropriate parcels to Sebree Solar 2.
There's a legal agreement that exists today that says that Boulevard Associates will transfer or assign those leases. Is that what you're saying, that there's a legal document that says that?
We're working on the legal documents to reassign those leases, Your Honor.
Okay, but we've got the case now. Is there anything now that says that Sebree Solar 2 LLC, the applicant for a construction certificate, is gonna have the leases to construct on these locations?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything, I guess what I'm trying to get across, and you're about the 4th applicant that's done this now. You are requesting a construction certificate. Sebree Solar LLC is requesting a construction certificate to build solar panels on land it has no legal right to. Is that right?
Well, through Sebree Solar 1, Your Honor.
Okay, but does Sebree Solar 2 have an agreement with Sebree Solar 1 for the property?
No, that's what we're working to reassign, Your Honor.
Do you see
Yes.
where I'm going here?
Yes, I do, Your
I
Honor.
just want to make sure it's clear
No.
on the record. You're requesting a construction certificate to build facilities on land that that the applicant does not have a right under law today with, right? Has no leases, has no assigned leases, has no contract for expected future assignment. Is that correct?
Well, we expect to reassign the leases that are part of Sebree Solar into Sebree Solar 2.
I get that you expect to, but is there some documentary contract that says you all have a right to it?
I'm unaware of that at this time, Your Honor.
So you all were asked in the first data request, and I hope you have a copy of it. If not, we can get you one. In the first round of data requests, you were asked in question number 5, to provide the corporate structure of NextEra Energy Resources LLC. Do you remember that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you know what your response was?
Nextera Energy Resources LLC is a wholly owned indirect subsidiary of Nextera Energy
Okay.
Incorporated.
Do you believe that to be a full answer to that question?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes.
So, who is Sebree Solar 2 LLC? Who has the ownership interest? Who are the members of Sebree Solar 2 LLC?
Nextera Energy Resources.
Is the entirety, the member manager of, there's no intermediate LLCs. Is that correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so Sebree Solar 2, its only member is, we'll call it NEER, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And NEER is the answer says a wholly owned indirect subsidiary of NextEra Energy Inc. So that's the entire corporate structure, that it's an indirect subsidiary of somebody else?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so what's it a direct subsidiary of?
Honestly, when we look at the subsidiaries, I'm unsure of exactly how it works. I know when we received the data request, that I went to the legal department to make sure we could best answer it. I can certainly follow up.
I don't know what the point of I mean, I don't see the need to follow up. It should have been answered entirely in the first place, but an indirect subsidiary does not indicate to the siting board who NextEra Energy Resources' corporate structure is, does it? It tells us who the ultimate parent company is, but it does not indicate to us that they're intermediate. We know for a fact they're intermediate, but it doesn't indicate who the intermediate subsidiaries are. Would you agree?
Okay. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so as a post-hearing data request, we're gonna ask again for the entire corporate structure of NextEra Energy Resources and Sebree Solar 2 LLC.
Yes, and to clarify, Your Honor, you'll want to see, in our response to make sure it's accurate, you'll want to see exactly from Sebree Solar 2 to NextEra Energy Resources, then to NextEra.
That's right, I mean, we've asked this question, I don't know, at least a dozen times in these cases, and it doesn't seem to be a problem for people to give us their corporate structure. So I was very confused as to why it was here.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. The Sebree Solar 2, okay, are you a employee of Sebree Solar 2 LLC?
I am not, Your Honor.
Are you an employee of Sebree Solar 1 LLC?
I am not, Your
Do
Honor.
you know whether Sebree Solar 1 or Sebree Solar 2 has employees?
I don't believe so, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you know? Oh, here we go. Sorry, I meant to go to the next question, number 6. So I asked you a second ago who the member is or members are of Sebree Solar 2 LLC. Your response was NextEra Energy Resources. Will you go to your response to request 6 of that first round?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you still believe that to be the case?
I do, but it sounds like we owe more information in between, Your Honor.
Okay, but you said earlier that NextEra Energy Resources was the member of Sebree Solar 2 LLC. Based off of your experience, if that was the case, wouldn't you agree that that means that NextEra Energy Resources would be the direct, Sebree Solar 2 LLC would be the direct subsidiary of NextEra Energy Resources LLC?
I believe so, but I guess I'm unfamiliar with what indirect and direct subsidiary would be.
Okay. Well, so direct subsidiary would indicate that it's immediately below. Indirect would mean that there's intermediates between the two. Does that make sense?
Right, yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so we're gonna ask again for the request 6 to find out what the corporate structure or the membership interest in Sebree Solar 2 LLC is.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so you don't know who has a membership interest directly in Sebree Solar 2 LLC, is that correct?
Again, it was my understanding NextEra Energy Resources, but being slightly unfamiliar with indirect and direct, I'd feel more comfortable just giving a more thorough response, as you outlined, Your Honor.
Okay, but just to be clear, the response does not tell us who has a membership interest. It tells us that they're merely an indirect subsidiary. Would you agree?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Who is responsible for, so take a big step back. You all filed responses to the, your counsel on your all's behalf filed responses to the consultant's report. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're aware of that? You've seen the document?
Yes, the Wells report, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes.
There were mitigation measures included in that report, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
What natural people, not entities, not companies, natural humans, what natural people are responsible for ensuring that Sebree Solar LLC, Sebree Solar 2 LLC complies with those mitigation measures?
Yes, myself and then my direct supervisor.
Okay.
Manager.
And who is your employer?
NextEra Energy Resources, Your Honor.
Okay. And then your supervisor is also an
NextEra
employee of
Energy.
NextEra Energy Resources?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Is it fair to say that Sebree Solar 2 depends on the people and the resources of NextEra Energy Resources LLC to ensure compliance with the law?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you generally aware of tax equity financing, like the existence of it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. After these projects are approved, built, construction starts, are these projects occasionally changed or their ownership interests changed in order to take advantage of tax equity financing?
I believe, Your Honor, my understanding is in some cases it is, yes.
Okay. Does that, by definition, they're not necessarily sold as much as they are moved if they stay internally at NextEra Energy Resources, is that right?
That's my understanding, Your
Okay.
Honor.
They're not sold to a non-affiliate, they still
Right.
stay in the family, is that?
Yes, that's my understanding, Your Honor.
Does that change who is in charge of ensuring compliance with the law of Sebree Solar 2 LLC?
No, it's my understanding that Sebree Solar 2, NextEra Energy Resources is still involved in ensuring compliance from construction throughout operation.
Okay. Now, if you all sold, if Sebree Solar 2 LLC was sold to AEP or AES or Duke Energy, some other entity, if it was sold, that would not necessarily be the case. Would you agree that NextEra Energy Resources would not necessarily be responsible for compliance because it would be owned by some completely different organization?
I guess in that case, yes, if the project was sold to another organization, then.
I guess
they
what I'm
would be
trying to ask is,
responsible.
could you agree that not all transfers are the same?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Have you been personally aware of conversations at NextEra about the implications of a production tax credit versus an investment tax credit, the availability of production tax credits versus investment tax credits in relation to whether there is necessarily a need now to include tax equity investors in these projects?
I haven't been involved in those conversations or unaware, Your Honor.
Mr. Bartels, is that right? Is that is the other witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Bartel works for NEER as well.
NextEra Energy Resources, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So, and I'm going to ask you first so that we don't have to call you back. Mr. Bartel is the witness in the application that indicated that Sebree Solar 2 nor any entity that owns a ownership interest in Sebree Solar 2 LLC has any environmental compliance problems. Are you generally aware of that provision of the
Yes, Your
application?
Honor.
Okay. Do you know which entities Mr. Bartel looked at when making the determination that no person or entity with an ownership interest in Sebree Solar LL2 has any known violations of federal or state environmental laws?
Your Honor, I don't know exactly what Mr. Bartels looked at. I know that during the application, I also took that and sourced it out to our NextEra Energy Resources legal department to ensure, hey, there's no violations within Sebree Solar 2 as well as NextEra to make sure we were in compliance.
Yeah, but do you see why the question about the corporate structure also matters there? Because if you all just looked at the corporate entity immediately above Sebree Solar 2 LLC, the unnamed entity in the record,
Yes, Your Honor.
but the entity above it, or the entity above it, or NEER, has an issue, and those are the people that are ensuring compliance with this case, that would be information that could be helpful for us. Would you
Yes,
agree?
Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
So we'll also ask as a post-hearing data request that Mr. Bartels doesn't know about which entities were reviewed and used as part of this response.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you,
Ms.
Your Honor.
Coney, do you have any redirect to this witness?
I don't have any further questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let's go ahead and take a short break since I suspect Mr. Andrews was the longest witness. We'll come back at 10:30. Take a short 15-minute recess. the record. Ms. Koenig, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, sir. We'd like to call Brian Bartels, please.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right, please have a seat. State your name and address for the record.
Brian Bartles, Senior Environmental Specialist with NextEra Energy Resources, 700 Universe Boulevard, Juno Beach, Florida, 33408.
Ms. Koenig?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Bartels.
Morning.
I know you've been, I guess, could you go ahead and let us know your title?
Yes, Senior Environmental Specialist.
And I think that you said in your address, but it's for NextEra, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And can you just explain generally your involvement with this project, please?
I oversaw the environmental due diligence and reporting for the project.
Okay. And so you had some reports in the application and then various responses in the first data request and the second data request?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I know you wanted to provide some updated information on data request 135. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So in our response, we had indicated that we would submit our approved jurisdictional determination to the Corps in August of 2023. However, in communicating with the Corps, the Louisville District, they are not accepting approved jurisdictional determination requests until they receive further guidance from their headquarters on.
I'm
What,
sorry,
Bartles,
could
do you
you-
mind, sorry, I
Sorry.
don't mean to be rude, but you really have to speak up.
Okay, understood.
Like, even louder than you are right there.
Okay. So, yes, we had responded that we would submit our approved jurisdictional determination to the Corps in August of this year. However, in communicating with the Louisville District, they are not accepting approved jurisdictional determination requests until they receive further guidance from the Corps headquarters on new guidance on what is considered a water of the U.S. based on the EPA v. Sackett ruling by the Supreme Court this past June. So we anticipate new guidance to come out in September of this year, and we will continue to coordinate with the Corps Louisville District to find the best time to submit our application for review.
Okay, thank you. And Your Honor, I just want to let the Society Board know that Mr. Bartles could address some of the issues that Deputy Secretary Lyons brought up.
Okay.
And it might be more appropriate for him to ask Mr. Bartles, but he could offer some information if you wanted me to go through those, but.
Well, if there's anything that you feel like you need to ask as a follow-up to Mr. Lyons' question, we'll give you an opportunity to do that. I'll redirect.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll offer this witness for cross-examination.
Ms. Dimple?
Mr. Bartles, you covered the jurisdictional issue. The other thing that I wanted to follow up on from the data request responses was that you all were not planning on doing any threatened or endangered species evaluation because that was covered for the Sebree 1 project. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, I'm sorry. You all were not planning on doing any threatened or endangered species evaluations because that was all done for the Sebree 1 project, but it was all kind of done as one whole thing when that one was done.
We have reviewed the project as a part of the initial review for Sebree 1. However, we have initiated informal consultation with the service specific to Sebree Solar 2, and will continue to engage with the service as well as the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet for any impacts to threatened or endangered species.
And do you know, right now, were there any of those species found on the property, or is it just kind of still just looking, or how far along are you, I guess, in that project? Issue, sorry.
Sure. So we have evaluated the project through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service IPAC program, which is their online database tool, and it indicates what species have potential to occur on site. And we've also completed a habitat assessment for the project for Sebree Solar 2 as well.
And what were the results? Did you find the habitat? I know it's normally bats, right? So were there
Yes,
any
ma'am.
bat habitats on the property?
Yes, ma'am, there is potential for habitat for some of the listed bat species.
And is that taken into consideration on the site plan with setbacks or avoidance areas or anything?
Yes, ma'am. Where feasible, we have buffered our potential suitable habitat by 25 feet in the site plan.
I know we talked about karst a little bit, but I just kind of wanted to know if you had any additional information about the karst issues. And I know that none was found, I guess, on this site in particular. But the geotechnical report also said that there could be some issues with the surface getting too wet or getting too soft because of rainwater. Did you all take that into consideration as well?
I can't speak specifically to the geotechnical report.
Okay.
Generally speaking, we will have low-growing herbaceous and perennial grass seed mix that will be used as ground cover underneath the panels that will absorb any water runoff from our panels.
Okay. And I think, just double check, but yeah, that's the only questions I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Secretary Lyons?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Bartels.
Good morning.
Just to follow up on that karst question, I do recognize that this is an area of low karst probability based on KGS, Kentucky Geological Survey, karst maps and so on and so forth. But I thought I saw somewhere where there may have been some karst features that still needed addressing or would be reviewed. Is that the case, and what are those?
Your Honor, I can't speak specifically to the geotechnical report. I can't speak directly to any outstanding karst features that may be present on site.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think I saw that in one of the data request responses that they still had to evaluate maybe a couple of features there. And of course, our interest in karst impacts has been pretty evident throughout all these hearings we've done. Although this area is low for karst probability, I guess we would need a follow-up on that, I guess. Mr. Bartels, you just testified that CORE is not taking any jurisdictional determination request until they get further guidance. However, once that happens, once that occurs and you do get a JD, what is NextEra's plan for addressing jurisdictional waters should they be identified?
Our intention is to avoid any impacts to jurisdictional waters identified on site and verified by the Corps, as well as buffer by 25 feet.
Yeah, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to turn off my video. I think
Yeah, that'd be fine. Just take 1 second, Mr. Bartles, while Deputy Secretary Lyons gets back on. Deputy Secretary, can you hear us?
I can now. Can you hear me?
Great, yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I caught most of Mr. Bartell's response to my jurisdictional question. Looking through my notes here. I guess the only other question that I have, Mr. Bartell, is did you all do Kentucky biological assessment tool run with our nature preserve?
Yes, sir.
What did it reveal? I know sometimes it's different than the IPAC. Was there any species, vegetative species that may have been of interest?
Your Honor, there was overlap in the species identified, specifically the bat species.
But no plants, no prairie species of plants, perhaps?
I would have to get back to you on the specifics of any plant species identified.
The reason I ask is if there are some prairie species identified, we would like to see the developer utilize those perhaps in their pollinators or some vegetative screening that may occur. I haven't seen it. I was unable to obtain that Kentucky bat run, so if we could follow up on that, that would be great.
Yes, Your Honor.
I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Montgomery?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Comer, do you have any questions for this witness?
No, but I found the discussion about the plants very interesting. I would hope that maybe native grasses or something would be considered for under the solar panels runoff control.
I appreciate that, Mr. Comer. We'll follow that up with a posterior data request to the company. Mr. Bishop, have you joined us? We have a second caller. Could you identify yourself? Okay. All right, we'll take care of that. Vice Chair, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
So, to that point, Mr. Bartles, what type of vegetation do you all place on your panels and other facilities?
Your Honor, it's typically a low-growing seed mix between herbaceous and perennial grasses.
Okay, so do you use exclusively native grasses or whatever is best for your all's interests?
Native species are preferred, but at a minimum, they're non-invasive.
Okay, non-invasive. So like Johnson grass is not something that you all would necessarily sow, is that right?
If that's an invasive species, Your Honor, then we would not implement that in our
Okay,
ground.
so take a step back. Not everything that grows is what was sown. What do you all do for controlling invasive species?
My understanding, generally speaking, we would apply a spot treatments, herbicide treatment for any invasives identified on site.
I mean, do you all have an internal policy if that's what you do, or is that a direction that you have? I mean, I get that that's a best practice. I'm just actually curious of what so the best way to say this. All right, take this area for instance: Roberts, Sebree, Pool, a lot of farms in that area. You're aware of that,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Ditches that aren't taken care of necessarily get very high Johnson grass. Farmers hate it. If you all put, so what is 150 megawatt project, so let's call it 900 acres of solar panels with grass underneath, and don't do anything to necessarily have these spot treatments, it's going to be 20 years of you all making people mad would be the nice way to say about it. If, for instance, you all allow Johnson grass to grow up high, do you all have specific processes in place or rules or best practices written to direct these two full-time operators of the facilities to actually take actions to reduce those invasive species?
Your Honor, I'm not aware of any specific plan. I know that our power generation division, our operation folks may have BMPs in place to address invasive plants, but I'm not aware of any specific plan at this time.
Can I ask as a post-hearing data request that question?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Koenig?
Yes, could I just follow up on a few issues, that were brought up in, Mr. Andrews' questioning that Mr. Bartles could address? However, I will not do that if you would rather just do it in a post-hearing data request.
You
It
can
was
go ahead.
regarding
Yeah.
the old wells that.
Yeah, feel
that-
free.
And the, okay. Mr. Barter, could you address, you heard Deputy Lyons' question about how the, developer what would the procedure be about identifying old wells or wells that hadn't been identified previously? And then also you had some information about the numbers that he was asking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So we identified a total of 66 wells on the subject property, including 25 dry and abandoned wells, 9 location wells, 24 oil wells, and 8 terminated permits.
Okay, and did you have a specific setbacks or plans as far as like avoidance and things like that, as far as your policy for dealing with those that have not been identified or coming upon something that you were not expecting?
Yes, ma'am. So for all of the oil wells we have identified thus far, we have applied a 30-foot buffer from those wells, from any project activities. Any newly discovered wells during additional due diligence or construction, we would coordinate with the Division of Oil and Gas to ensure that they are aware of that newly discovered well, and we would also coordinate with the landowner and our construction contractor to find the best possible solution, whether that would be avoidance or abandonment, plugging.
Okay, and then you heard the Deputy Commissioner Lyons talk about soil quality. You could ask about that. And can you speak to that issue?
Sure, absolutely. So, following construction, any disturbed areas are vegetated with low-growing perennial and herbaceous grass seed mix, and that is consistent with the Kentucky Pollutant Discharge Elimination System construction stormwater permit.
Okay, and we can still elaborate further if there were still questions that he had in a post-hearing data request, but we just wanted to provide as much information as we could this morning, so, thank
Deputy
you.
Secretary, any questions?
No, Mr. Chair, and I think that covers it. I was more concerned about the, anything that they might discover that they didn't know was there, and I find Mr. Bartell's response adequate in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Bartles.
Thank you.
Ms. Koenig, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, sir. We'd like to call Elizabeth Wilburn, please.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Wilburn. I go by Beth. And the address is 161 East Aurora Road, Northfield, Ohio, 44067.
Ms. Koenig?
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Could you please state your employer and your title, please?
Sure. My employer is Environmental Consulting Technology, Inc., which the abbreviation is ECT, and I am an environmental consultant.
And can you please describe your contribution to this project?
Sure. So basically, I work with Brian Bartles. He's kind of my boss in this situation, and do a lot of the same similar reporting, environmental due diligence.
Okay, and I know that you had some information that you felt like you could provide the siting board in response to one of the questions earlier about the distance, from a transformer, I think that.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Andrews-
So Mr. Andrews was asked about the closest non-participating residents to the substation distance, and that's 4,701 feet.
So can I be clear? I just, because I'll forget the question when it comes to me. That's the project substation for the Sebree Solar 1 project, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And so there will be a collection line that runs about 4,000 feet from, well, there will be a collection line that runs from Sebree Solar 2 to the project substation of Sebree Solar 1 LLC, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the nearest home, trying to get this right, the nearest home to that project substation should be the exact same distance as the nearest home was provided to us in the Sebree Solar 1 case, is that right? Unless a home has been built or destroyed, the substation isn't moving from
Right.
Sebree Solar 1
Right.
that you're referring to.
Correct. This is what the distance was taken from the noise report, which reports on receptors or occupied structure residences within 1 mile of the Sebree Solar 2 project. So they could be different distances because it's that 1 mile buffer from the Sebree Solar 2 project. I can
You're saying there
check
could be
the distance.
I just want to make sure I get what your response is. You're saying there could be a home on the opposite side of the project substation from Sebree Solar 2 that is in excess of 5,280 feet of the edge of Sebree Solar 2, but closer to the substation than the 4,000 plus feet you're talking about?
So I would have to go back to your question regarding if it's the same distance as in Sebree, for the Sebree, I'd have to go back and check that. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the distance that we reported for Sebree Solar in those tables.
Okay. All right, Ms. Koenig?
I'd like to offer the witness for cross-examination.
Ms. Temple?
I don't believe I have any questions, thank you.
Deputy Secretary?
No questions for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Montgomery?
No questions from me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Comer, any questions?
None for me, Mr. Chairman.
Are you responsible for I see the ECT prepared it, but are you responsible for the decommissioning plan that was submitted with the application?
Yes, sir. We had an engineer prepare that.
Okay. Is this the first decommissioning plan that you've seen, decommissioning study that you've seen?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you have a copy of it in front of you?
I do.
Oh, sorry, you already have it.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. So on page, there's a cover sheet. So page 7 is the estimated decommissioning costs and salvage values after 30 years of operation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first I want to ask you about the restoration. Is it your understanding, well, never mind. The decommissioning cost here, the expense of decommissioning is about 3 to 1 of the salvage value. Is that right?
Yes, that's what it looks like, sir.
So the cost net of salvage is a positive amount. Is that right? Cost to decommission net of the salvage value of the facilities is still, it's going to cost more than it is that you would get from salvaging the.
Correct. Yes,
excess
sir.
material.
Yes.
Is this consistent with other decommissioning studies that you've seen, that it costs more to decommission these facilities than you can salvage them?
I'd have to look. I have been part of for Sebree Solar. I was in on that decom plan. I reviewed it, but I don't remember. I would anticipate, yes, that would be true, but I would need to go back and look at that.
Okay. And can I ask you about the asterisk that is used here? because I just don't necessarily understand what it's intending on representing. That the cost of earthwork and putting the soil back to the way it was before is both a cost and included in the salvage value.
On that, again, I would ask for a post-hearing data request if needed. I'd like to go back to the engineer that did these calculations, just to make sure I fully understand what his intentions were.
Well, do you see the asterisk is attempted to be explained there?
Yeah, under the table?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So it says value derived from optional owner retention of components or not requesting soil restoration, not material salvage. You have any idea what that can mean?
I would need to ask the engineer just to make sure
Okay.
that I give you a correct answer.
I'd like to ask that as a post-hearing data request. I just want to make sure it's clear. It's not surprising to you to find out that it's going to cost more to remove the panels after 30 years than what they're worth after 30 years. Is that?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement.
Are you personally aware of any instance where anyone you've worked with or anyone that you've are you personally aware of any instance where the salvage value of a decommissioned facility, a solar facility, is in excess of the cost to decommission it?
I can't answer that question, sir. I have looked at several decom plans, but I'm not an expert in this area.
You know, that's fine. I'm not asking about the plans. I
Yeah.
want to be very clear what
Yeah.
I'm asking a very specific question. Are you personally aware of any instances where a solar facility has been decommissioned and the salvage value post decommissioning was in excess of the cost to decommission the facility?
I don't know.
You're not aware of any
I
instances?
am not aware.
Okay. And do you know the decommissioning study also references the Henderson County ordinance to talk about how decommissioning must take place within a certain prescribed time following the generation of electricity? Are you generally aware of that?
Yes, sir.
Do you know how the applicant intends on providing, well, I guess I'll say this way. Do you know how the applicant intends on being held to compliance with that? Like, how would the Henderson Planning and Zoning Commission know that they haven't produced energy for 12 months?
I do not know the answer to that. I would have to default that to potentially Mr. Andrews, or we could do a post-hearing data request.
Let's ask it as a post-hearing data request. What the applicant intends to do in terms of notifying the Henderson Planning and Zoning Commission that they've ceased to generate electricity for any prescribed amount of time, including the 12 months required by the ordinance for decommissioning. All right, thank you very much. Any redirect, Ms. Koenig?
No, sir.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Ms. Koenig?
We'd like to call Aaron Bowen, please.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Erin Bowen. Address is 1 South Wacker Drive, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Ms. Koenig?
Good morning. Can you please state your employer and your title, please?
My employer is Cone Resnick. My title is Senior Manager. I am a commercial property appraiser, and I have an MAI designation.
Thank you. And can you describe your activity with this project?
Yeah. NextEra reached out to me to analyze any potential impact solar facilities may have on adjacent property values.
Thank you. I'd like to offer the witness for cross-examination, please.
Ms. Tibble?
Yes. Ms. Bowen, I know that you touched on this in one of the responses to a data request, but how did you all determine that the 4 projects in Henderson County taken as a whole, or the Sebree 2 project being the last project would not impact the property values of the surrounding homes?
Yeah, we have performed our analysis of multiple existing solar facilities across the United States. Some of them have 200 or 239 megawatts in existence. I understand the question was intended to determine the cumulative effect of the neighboring projects, and our response referred to other Midwestern states approving multiple projects, some upwards of 1,300 megawatts, including the Mammoth Solar Project in Indiana that is currently under construction. We believe that due to our studies that we haven't seen any effect from these larger scale solar projects. Certainly, we've identified homes that have been surrounded on multiple sides, some encompassed on all 4 sides, and have seen no impact in terms of property value decrease. And we find that these results are similar for other large-scale projects.
Okay. Are you aware in any of your research, are there any projects that are fully built that would be as large as these 4 together?
I don't believe at this time I am personally aware of any existing solar facilities that are in operation of in excess of 600 megawatts. I do believe there are some in Texas, and we have attempted to study them. However, I believe that we were unable to do so because they were not adjacent any single-family residences. So I do not believe that at this time there are any existing solar projects of that size in which we are able to study.
Okay, so at this point, you all don't really have any comparison, and so you don't really have anything at this time to say no property values would not be affected by these projects all being together in Henderson County.
At this time, I have not studied anything in excess of 600 megawatts. However, I believe in our response to number 13, we identified several projects in Ohio that total, I think, 815 megawatts. Listed one of those projects as Hillcrest Solar, that has been in operation since December 2021, that totals 200 megawatts. That project we have indeed studied, and that we have not found any negative impact to the surrounding property values. There have been approvals for other projects in the same vicinity as Hillcrest, which is in operation and has not had any negative impact.
Okay, I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Secretary?
No questions for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Montgomery?
No questions for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Comer? Mr. Comer, do you have any questions for this witness?
None from me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair?
I don't.
Um, Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you redirect Ms. Comer? Thank you.
we'd like to call Josh Turner, or Crawford. I don't know who Josh Turner is. Sorry about that. Josh. Please, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
That's all right.
Okay.
That's the worst thing you do.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right, please have a seat. State your name and business address for the record.
Joshua Crawford, 235 South Fifth Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202.
Ms. Koenig, you may ask.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please state your employer and your title, please?
I am the former executive director of Pegasus Institute.
Okay, and yeah, you wanted to explain that a little bit. At the time that you performed these requirements for the application, you were employed by Pegasus?
That's correct.
Okay, and where are you employed now?
I work for the Georgia Center for Opportunity, which is based in Atlanta.
Okay, and what is your title, or what was your title when you did this report?
I was the executive director of Pegasus Institute.
Okay, and can you just describe, what you contributed to the project?
Sure. So I oversaw the entirety of the project as well as assisted in some of the direct formation of the report.
Okay, and just to describe the report, it's the economic impact report, and could you
Yes,
just
ma'am.
describe what that is?
Yeah, so it examines both the primary and secondary economic impact of the investment in this particular area of Kentucky associated with this project.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to offer our witness for cross-examination.
Mr. Crawford, sorry. The inputs that you used for your evaluation, did you come up with those inputs yourself, or were those supplied by NextEra or the environmental consultant on the project?
In terms of total anticipated investment, jobs, those kinds of numbers, those were provided by NextEra.
And so, did you just kind of plug them into the formula and?
Yeah, the in-plan system is a proprietary formula that takes into account local factors as well as the investment and the industry.
And so, did you do any kind of independent analysis or just that in-plan model?
So the in-plan model provided most of it. For some of the numbers, there was a question earlier about the full-time positions. Those numbers were first provided by NextEra, and then we surveyed the available job postings in states with regular job postings for those types of numbers to ensure that those numbers were within the relevant ranges for those numbers as well.
And so, did you say that the total economic input came from NextEra as well?
So which number are you referring to?
I'm sorry, the one that you were referring to. I was speaking about just more the salary and the amount of jobs, but then you indicated.
So no, those numbers came from NextEra. We then calculate from those
Okay.
sort of the total
Okay,
number, yes.
I
ma'am.
misunderstood you then. I'm sorry. I don't think I have anything else. Thank you.
Deputy Secretary, any questions?
No questions for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Crawford.
Good morning.
First question I have is, do you know of the 200 positions during construction, do you know how many of those are full-time equivalent?
I do not, no.
Okay, and did you also prepare the report for Sebree number 1?
Yes, sir.
And so one of the questions that I have in kind of comparing the two reports is that in Sebree number 1, there was an estimated payroll of $24 million divvied up by, I believe it was 300 full-time construction jobs. Yet we are looking at a direct payroll here of $10 million divvied up by 200. Could you explain the difference between the two?
I would have to go back and double check to be sure, but my assumption would be that those have to do with changes in the anticipated rates of pay based on the experience of prior projects in those instances.
Mr. Montgomery, you're on mute.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. I guess where I'm getting at is in Sebree number 1, if you, for simplicity, if you divide 300 jobs by 24 million, you get roughly 80,000 per job. Yet in this calculation, you divide 10 million by, say, 200, and you get roughly 50,000. And I think it's probably fair to assume that wages haven't significantly dropped in the course of the past 2 years. So that's kind of where I'm getting at. But moving on, so when you were calculating the numbers within plan, what was the methodology for determining the region?
Yeah, so in-plan is as specific as to a local county. So Henderson County's numbers are different from, say, Breckenridge or Meade County's numbers. It is that specific, and so we use the Henderson County multiplier there.
Did you also take into consideration commuting patterns, given the proximity to metropolitans such as Evansville?
So the in-plan system does take that into account for a region like Henderson versus a region that is perhaps further away, yes.
So the jobs that we're looking at, say the 200, are those Kentucky jobs, or do we have a way of knowing the mix of Kentucky versus Indiana?
In-plan does not provide a way of knowing that necessarily, and I believe it was testified to earlier that within the contracting process, there's a preference for local jobs, but I can't speak to the exact makeup of where the individual employees will come from.
Got it. And then so I believe in your report, it says that you took the median wages provided by the company to get an average wage of $82,800. And I'm curious, how do you go from taking a median wage to computing an average wage?
Right. So my assumption is that the difference there is the makeup of those jobs, that obviously the construction managers make substantially more than, and the electricians make substantially more than some of those other jobs, but those are a smaller percentage of the job, and therefore the median wage is higher than the mean wage.
Okay. And then when it comes to the tax revenue section, can you elaborate the methodology in getting the actual tax revenue?
Sure. So the tax revenue section focuses primarily on local property tax revenue. We did not as a part of this report calculate income tax revenue. There is both a general and Kentucky-specific reason for that. The general reason is that when calculating a total economic investment, because income taxes are taken from portions of wages, if you calculate that out separately and then add it back in, you'd actually double count that money. And so we generally don't count income tax revenue. The Kentucky-specific reason is that the General Assembly has put in place a plan to phase out the state income tax, but the revenue triggers for that are not date-specific, they're revenue-specific. And so those numbers may change depending on what revenue looks like for a given year or a given period of time. And so to give a precise income tax number, even if we didn't sort of double count it in a total economic investment number, would be imprecise for the Commonwealth.
And when it comes to, I guess, so did you, when calculating your estimated number, did you take into consideration, or I think it says that you took the company's average of $390,000 in property tax payments. Did that at all play into your analysis?
That sounds correct. I admittedly do not recall at the moment.
Okay, and throughout the report, I believe, where am I going here? It states that the median household income is $48,926. Yet throughout, I see that there are multiple places where it says the average wage is $48,926. Is that just serendipitous, or do you think there's a chance that there's an error there?
Could you elaborate on that? I'm happy to check.
Cool. So let me pull it up on page, give me 1 second here. On page 8, you have a diagram that says median household income, 48,926. And then it says average wage jobs based in the county, it says 42,892. Yet when you look at page 13, it says average wage for Henderson County job, it says 48,926. And so I'm just trying to figure out, is that the average wage or is that the median household income?
That is.
Is there a
That is the median household income, which is different from the average wage in the county, and that is merely, quite embarrassingly, a formatting error on page 13.
Okay, and then I think I have one more, just give me a second. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Comer, any questions for this witness?
None from me, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair? Commissioner Regan?
No, I don't think so.
Any redirect, Ms. Koenig?
I do. Do you have a specific policy as far as the data that you use, as far as it being obviously knowable, or
Yeah.
how you approach these
So
projects?
as a general rule, when looking at the economic impact of an investment like that, we try to be sort of as conservative as possible in estimations. It's relatively easy, frankly, to inflate numbers for the economic impact of things. And so it's important to us that the numbers that we put forward are knowable and correct as it relates to the impact that they will have on the surrounding community. And so that's why we don't factor in certain numbers that may otherwise make things appear larger than they actually would end up being.
Okay, and then also, you have looked at other projects going on in Kentucky, but because of just the nature of the industry right now in Kentucky, there's not a lot of data from Kentucky, is that right?
Yeah, so for example, for those full-time positions, that's one of the reasons we had to look outside the state for regular job postings for those. Maryland and North Carolina, I believe, are the two states that are mentioned, and that's because they regularly have job postings like this. Even in other surrounding states, it's far more sporadic because the industry is just not quite as robust as it is other places. And the places where it's the most robust, like in the West, just aren't good comparisons for the Commonwealth.
Okay, and you also follow up with what was actually paid for certain positions so that you adjust to how that affects your study, is that correct?
We certainly did that as it relates to NextEra and their projects, in making sure that we had the most up-to-date numbers for them versus other projects, yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
We have Dennis Jack on our witness list. He did not provide testimony or responses to any materials that are in the record. However, we just wanted to provide him in case you needed any further information that maybe he could provide.
Is there anything from you, Ms. Temple?
I don't believe so, no.
That'd be fine. You're more than welcome to call him, but he's not required to be here, and it doesn't sound like unless Deputy Secretary Lyons or Mr. Montgomery have questions, don't think there's any need on our end.
Okay, we
Do
don't have
not.
anything. Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. We don't have any need to call him then.
All right,
Thank you.
Is there anything else from the applicant in this case, Ms. Koenig?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there anything else, Ms. Temple?
No, sir.
All right, so we'll have post-hearing data requests. I don't think we'll get them out by Friday, because that's tomorrow. We'll give ourselves until probably Monday or Tuesday. We'll enter a post-hearing procedural schedule that provides for 14 days to respond to those post-hearing data requests. I think we'll probably have, you've heard most of, maybe a dozen.
I think, it's like 16 days because of Labor Day.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll do a post-hearing procedural schedule that provides at least 14 days for responses. The regulations, of course, provide you all 7 days post-hearing to file a brief if you would like to in this matter. My understanding is that the final order has to be entered by October the 13th. Is that right, Ms. Temple?
Yes, sir.
We'll certainly endeavor to do so. Is there anything else from the applicant? Anything else we need to do, Ms. Temple? All right, thank you all very much. This hearing is adjourned.
Something